What do you do when you realize that almost everything you have been taught to call yourself is actually just a collection of scars, survival strategies, and names that other people gave you? What do you do when you wake up in the middle of your life, look in the mirror, and realize that the person staring back at you feels like a stranger who was assembled by accident, shaped entirely by the pressures of a world you never asked to enter? How do you quiet the agonizing suspicion that if you stripped away the expectations of your family, the trauma of your childhood, the anxiety of your bank account, and the heavy memories of your greatest mistakes, there would be nothing left of you at all? It is a terrifying thought, the fear that we are nothing more than a blank slate upon which our circumstances have written a tragic story, that we are merely clay molded by the clumsy hands of a broken world, destined to be broken in return. We spend our lives trying to heal, trying to rebuild, and trying to find ourselves, but the underlying dread remains. What if the damage goes all the way to the core? And what if the core itself is nothing but a fragile, manufactured thing that can be permanently ruined? You have sat in the quiet of the night asking these exact questions, even when you did not have the words to voice them. You have felt the crushing weight of believing that your identity is a product of your history, that you are defined by the room you grew up in, the words that were shouted at you, the betrayers who walked away from you, and the doors that were slammed in your face. You have looked at your patterns, your anxiety, your hypervigilance, your deep-seated sense of inadequacy, and you have wept because you believed these things were your actual substance, that you were fundamentally damaged at the factory level. But I am here to tell you that this quiet, persistent ache, this feeling of friction between who you are living as and who you feel you should be, is not a sign of your ruin. It is the beginning of your remembering. It is the stirring of an ancient, indestructible reality inside you that is rejecting the cheap, temporary materials of your mortal history. You are feeling this division because the divine blueprint of your existence is actively fighting against the false definitions you have accepted for your identity. This is not a random psychological crisis, and it is not a sign that you are failing. It is a structural alignment of the soul, a pattern that is as old as the heavens and has been felt by every chosen soul who was ever called to step out of the shadows of their circumstances and into the light of their true calling. The enemy of your soul has been working overtime to keep you blind to this pattern, whispering a lie that is designed to keep you paralyzed in a state of perpetual spiritual amnesia. The whisper has been quiet but relentless. You are nothing more than what has happened to you. You are the sum of your wounds. You are the product of your mother's anxieties and your father's absences. You are the mistakes of your youth, the financial failures of your adulthood, and the quiet betrayals you have carried in silence. You are damaged goods, created out of nothing, shaped by chaos, and destined to be defined by the very dust you walk on. This whisper wants you to believe that your identity is a house built entirely out of your pain, so that whenever a storm hits, you believe the storm is not just battering your walls, but destroying your actual existence. It is the ultimate deception of the accuser, to convince you that you were made by your mortality, so that you will never look past your mortality to see what you actually are. But 200 years ago, in a small, crowded room on the second floor of the Newell K. Whitney store in Kirtland, Ohio, a young prophet received a revelation that shattered this cosmic lie once and for all. It was May of 1833. Joseph Smith was living in a world that was spiritually suffocated by the heavy, dark dogmas of sectarian Christianity. The prevailing religious minds of his day taught the doctrine of creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. They preached that human beings were mere clay, manufactured by the sovereign whim of a distant deity who brought them into existence out of absolute void. According to this view, you had no past before your birth, no inherent independent existence, and no light that did not originate with your physical creation. You were fundamentally fragile, a temporary construct of the dust, entirely dependent on a creator who could just as easily cast you into eternal torment as keep you in his presence. This doctrine stripped humanity of its dignity, turning the soul into a passive, created object that was entirely defined by the moment of its manufacture. It meant that you were fundamentally weak, fundamentally sinful, and fundamentally a product of whatever vessel you were poured into. But as Joseph Smith sat with his ink and paper in that humid Ohio spring, surrounded by the noise of a rapidly growing movement and the constant threat of persecution, the heavens parted, and a voice spoke a truth so revolutionary, so ancient, and so utterly liberating that it sent shockwaves through the entire theological landscape of the world. The revelation was recorded as section 93 of the Doctrine and Covenants, and in it, the Lord declared words that should make your spirit leap with recognition. Man was also in the beginning with God. Intelligence, or the light of truth, was not created or made, neither indeed can be. Take a moment and let the sheer majesty of that declaration wash over your tired soul. Joseph Smith did not just teach that you have an immortal soul that will live forever after you die. He taught that the very core of your soul, the seat of your consciousness, your unique individual intelligence, has no beginning. It was never created, it was never made, and it can never be destroyed. To understand the depth of what Joseph was revealing, you must understand the distinction he made between your physical body, your spirit body, and your intelligence. In the theology of the restoration, your physical body was formed from the elements of this earth, and your spirit body was organized by heavenly parents in a premortal realm. But before your spirit was organized, and before your physical body was formed, there was intelligence. Joseph taught that this intelligence is the self-existent, eternal core of who you are. It is the light of truth. It is that part of you that is co-eternal with God Himself. Later in his ministry, in April of 1844, Joseph stood before an audience of over 20,000 people in the dust of Nauvoo, Illinois, to deliver what would become his final grand discourse, the King Follett Sermon. He was tired, he was being hunted by his enemies, and he knew his time on earth was short. Yet he stood in the open air, the wind blowing through his hair, and spoke for over 2 hours about the true nature of the human soul. He held up a ring and said that if you cut it in two, it has a beginning and an end, but if you leave it whole, it is eternal. He declared, "The soul, the mind of man, the immortal spirit, where did it come from? All learned men and doctors of divinity say that God created it in the beginning. But it is not so. The very idea lessens the character of man, in my estimation. I am dwelling on the immortality of the spirit of man. Is it logical to say that the intelligence of spirits is immortal, and yet that it had a beginning? The intelligence of spirits had no beginning, neither will it have an end. Intelligence is ring-like. There is no end." Joseph's teachings on the eternal nature of intelligence are the educational and spiritual backbone of the entire restoration, and they contain the key to your ultimate liberation. The spiritual principle here is as profound as it is absolute. What you are at your very core is completely indestructible because it was never constructed by mortal circumstances. Think about the implications of this truth. If your identity was created by your upbringing, then a bad upbringing could ruin you forever. If your identity was made by your achievements, then a single failure could wipe you out of existence. If who you are was constructed by the trauma you experienced, then you are a broken vessel that can never be truly whole. But the restoration teaches us that your physical life, your family of origin, the cultural moment you were born into, and even the chemical makeup of your brain are not the authors of your existence. They are merely the schoolhouse. They are the laboratory. They are the heavy, dusty suit of clothes you have put on for a brief, intense season called mortality. They did not create the occupant. The occupant is an eternal, uncreated intelligence that has traveled through the vast expanses of eternity, through primeval light and premortal realms of glory, to arrive in the specific body, at the specific hour, to face the specific trial. Let this truth settle into the deepest, most quiet chambers of your heart right now, chosen one. Look back at the history you have been mourning. Think of the worst thing that was ever done to you, the betrayal that left you gasping for air, the abuse that made you feel like you were nothing but trash to be discarded, the words of rejection that felt like they were carved into your very bones. Under the brilliant, unyielding light of Joseph's revelation, look at those events again. They did not touch your intelligence. They damaged the coat you are wearing. They bruised the clay of your mortal temple. They disrupted the neural pathways of your physical brain and wounded your nervous system. But they could not reach the uncreated, eternal light that sits at the center of your being. You have been mourning as if your core has been corrupted, as if the trauma has rewritten your actual spiritual DNA. But it has only rewritten your survival patterns. The real you, the intelligence that walked with God before the world was, the light of truth that cannot be made or destroyed, remains completely intact, untouched, and utterly pure. The world wants you to believe that you are a blank canvas, and that every artist who has ever held a brush in your life has had the right to paint their version of you upon your soul. They have painted fear, they have painted lack, they have painted unworthiness, and they have painted shame. But Joseph's revelation declares that you are not a blank canvas. You are an ancient tapestry, woven in the light of eternity, and the dirty paint of this world is nothing more than a temporary layer of dust that can be washed away in an instant when you remember who you are. You do not need to find yourself, because you cannot lose what is eternal. You only need to remember yourself. You need to strip away the false definitions that your family of origin, your cultural programming, and your personal failures have draped over your shoulders. You are not the child who was ignored. You are the eternal intelligence who watched the creation of worlds. You are not the person who failed in business. You are the light of truth that survived the war in heaven. You are not the body that was abused. You are the indestructible spark of the self-existent fire of God. This means that your value is not a variable that goes up when you have a good day and down when you stumble. Your value is a constant, anchored in the reality of your eternal existence. You do not have to earn the right to exist, and you do not have to prove that you are worthy of love, because your existence is a fundamental, uncreated fact of the universe. You are co-eternal with the Father of your spirit. When God looks at you, He does not see a fragile, temporary creature that He made out of nothing on a whim. He sees a peer. He sees another eternal intelligence who chose to enter into covenant with Him, who chose to leave the realms of absolute light to put on the heavy, dark veil of mortality so that you could learn, grow, and become like Him. He respects your eternal independence because He did not create it. He organized it, He loved it, and He paved a way for it to expand into infinite glory. Why have you been allowing the small, temporary voices of people who do not even know their own identity to define yours? Why have you let the broken words of a parent, a spouse, and boss, or an enemy determine the value of a soul that has existed since before the foundations of the world? The heaviness you are feeling right now, that deep, aching tension in your chest, is not depression. It is the pressure of your eternal self trying to break through the narrow, suffocating mold that your mortal life has forced you into. It is the uncreated intelligence inside you screaming for room to breathe. It is the light of truth refusing to be contained by the lies of total depravity and human worthlessness. Let the mold break. Let the expectations of others fall away like dead leaves in autumn. Let the memories of your worst mistakes burn up in the fire of this realization. You are not a fragile creation of dust waiting to be shattered. You are an indestructible force of eternal light that has temporarily stepped into the clay. It is time to step into your power. It is time to agree with what God knows about you, and what you once knew about yourself before the veil of forgetfulness was drawn over your eyes. You did not come to this earth to be a victim of your circumstances. You came to this earth to master them. You came to bring the uncreated light of your eternal intelligence into the darkness of this fallen world, to organize the chaos of your mortal life just as God organized the chaos of the primeval elements. Every trial you are facing, every wound you are carrying, and every mountain that stands in your way is not an obstacle to your identity. It is the material through which your eternal intelligence is demonstrating its power. You are here to prove that light cleaveth unto light, that truth receiveth truth, and that nothing in this mortal sphere has the power to extinguish the spark of eternity that lives inside you. Hear these words, chosen one, and let them wake you up from the deep sleep of mortality. The time for allowing your circumstances to write your name is over. The days of letting your past dictate your future are finished. You are being called to stand in the raw, uncreated power of your eternal identity. You are being called to look at your history not as a prison that contains you, but as a classroom that you are about to graduate from. The harvest of your life is sure because the seed of your existence was never planted in the soil of this earth. It was planted in the fertile ground of eternity, and it has already survived the test of ages. Stand up, shake off the dust of your trauma, and walk in the confidence of a soul that has always existed, and will always exist, shining brighter and brighter unto the perfect day. Speak these words with me now, not as a wish, not as a hope, but as a recognition and a reclamation of what has always been true. I am not defined by what was done to me or what I have done. My essential self predates all of it. I reach back to what I have always been and I bring it forward into who I am becoming. I release the lie that my trauma has rewritten my identity. I reclaim the uncreated light that has always lived inside my soul. I am not a product of my circumstances. I am an eternal intelligence, co-eternal with the Father of my spirit. I am indestructible, I am eternal, and I am here on purpose. My character is catching up to my calling, and I will walk in the light of my true self from this moment onward. This is my truth, this is my power, and this is my eternal inheritance.